In this tutorial, we're going to talk about how and why to use both the BYROW and BYCOL functions. These two functions go hand in hand with one another, as you might be able to figure out by their names. One of them goes by row and the other one goes by column. So why would we need to use these two functions? If you have a data set in which there is data going vertically down the page and or horizontally across the page, there are going to be times when you want to perform some sort of calculation on those values, and sometimes you want to go horizontally across and sometimes you want to go vertically down. If you want to perform a specific calculation on each row of the data, going down the page, you want to use the BYROW function. And similarly, if you want to do a calculation on each column of the data, one column at a time, you will use the BYCOL function. Now these two functions, they both accept any lambda function as the thing to be applied to that data, or you could also use some simple options that we'll see in a moment. So in this environment right here, we'll see that we could go either horizontally or vertically. If we want to sum up everything in each of the different columns, we can use the BYCOL function and refer to the entire array of cells, and it will go one column at a time. Or if we want to sum up each of the different people's information, then we are going to go by row down the page. So let's see this in action in the both BYROW and BYCOL functions. For our simple example of BYROW, I'm going to do something you would never do, which is I'm going to throw the sum function into the BYROW function. So simply equal sign BYROW. And then you see here, what is the array? The array is all of these cells that contain all these number values. And then after a comma, something that's interesting here is you can simply say, let me use the sum function by its name, and then close the parentheses. So if the function that you want to use is as simple as something like count, average, max, min, or sum, you can simply put in the word sum and you're good to go. Now when I hit enter on the keyboard, as you can see there, yes, we have the grand total of all the values in this row being added over here on the right. But again, that probably adds more complexity to the scenario than is really necessary. But if you're trying to use multiple functions at the same time, using these array functions in a variety of different ways, then BYROW can tell it exactly what you want to do in some very useful ways. So right here, the basic premise of what I'm trying to do is I'm going to be using the filter function to show which salespeople belong to this region. But then I don't want to return month 1, 2, and 3 as independent values, but instead I want to add those 3 columns together, of course using BYROW. So this is going to use a couple of different array functions in the same go. Specifically, we are going to horizontally stack these things together. So we go to the Formulas tab at the top of the screen, use the Lookup and Reference drop-down menu, and choose HStack. Now for the first array to be horizontally stacked, we would like to filter the set of salespeople. So here we'll use the filter function. We will highlight all of the salespeople as the first array to be used, and then we need to tell it how to filter the data. So we need to highlight the region column and set that equal to this cell up here that has Western USA in it, and close the parentheses. So our first setup here says take all of those values and filter it down to just those people who work in the Western US. And as you can see, the first result is Bobby Thompson, right here, which is in fact the first person who works in the Western US. But now what I want to be able to do is take a filtered set of month 1, 2, and 3 and add the different columns together. So in the second array, I'm also going to do a filter function, and I'm going to highlight the months 1, 2, and 3 columns there. And then after a comma, again, set the region column equal to Western US, which again returns the individual values. Notice here that we have 27,100, comma, 25,300, comma, 27,900, semicolon. So that shows you that Bobby Thompson's values are the first set of values, followed by the next person on the list, Nevea Salinas right there. So we want to take those filtered values right there, and now we want to add them up row by row. So what we're going to do before the filter function here is type in by row and open the parentheses. And now in order to make this as easy as possible to use, I'm going to click on the words by row up here in the formula bar. So as you can see here, it's now saying on the by row function that we are going to take the results of the filter function as our array. And then right here, we want to figure out what function we want to use, what kind of lambda function we want to apply. And again, we can just put in the word sum here, or we can write it out more elaborately. We can do lambda, open parens, and then we'll take cols as the argument, and then we simply want to do a sum function on the cols. That is another way of writing it. Again, just the word sum would be vastly faster and easier to write there, but that is actually what's happening. So we click OK and click yes, and right there you see that Bobby Thompson all the way down to Kareem Galal. We have the total value for each of those individuals, 80,300. And the benefit here is that I can now dynamically filter the results and have this little table generated for me there. So again, the total function is that we are using the H stack to take one filtered set of the salespeople and combine that with the filtered combined 3 columns using the by row function to add those 3 columns together. Similarly to our previous example, here we have different columns of data, and we want to be able to add what's in each of the different columns. Clicking the Formulas tab at the top of the screen and choosing the Logical drop-down menu, I can choose the BYCOL function. Again, highlight the entire array of cells from D6 down and across to H26, and it will go one column at a time and apply a function. In the function box right here, we can either decide to generate a full lambda function or simply type in sum, and when we click OK, it will fill going across and calculate the results for each of the different columns. Now again, I don't see too many people deciding to do something as simple as the total of a column using this BYCOL function. But if you have really complex setup of data and you want to build a little report on that data, again, BYCOL could really help out. In this instance over here on the right, you can see that we have multiple columns of data, each of which need to be totaled for any particular section. Here you can see I've got a drop-down menu allowing me to filter based on which business unit we're talking about. I'll choose household. And what I'd like to be able to do is get a small report right here of the total number of employees, year-to-date expenses, etc. for the household business unit. So could we make that happen? If we go to cell R8 right here, we can build up a function wherein we filter the business unit and we filter all the other columns and we stack those together. Now, in the previous example, we used hstack to stack those together horizontally. Here, we can decide to vertically stack them together. So I will use =vstack. And I'll go ahead and highlight from number of employees all the way across to total sales. Then after a comma here, I need to be able to go BYCOL across this on just the simple data set of all the household entries. So I will use the BYCOL function. And the array that this function will use is the filtered data set, where I highlight the array here from L6 to P30, comma, if the business unit over here on the right, J6 through J30, is equal to household. Then close the parentheses. So first, we have here that we are using the BYCOL function on the filtered data set of only the household products. After the comma, we see here that again, we could decide that we want to build up a custom lambda function or simply use the sum function, and that's exactly what I'll do. Then closing the parentheses on BYCOL and closing the parentheses on vstack. I can then press enter on my keyboard and I get this beautiful little report of the total number of employees and all other factors for the household business unit. If I switch this to baby, you can see I get that new data set. Now finally, I often like to see this vertically, and I can still take everything that I just did and put it inside the transpose function, like so, and it will simply turn that array of cells vertically instead of horizontally. Then I can come in here and format using comma notation, using currency notation, and again, very simply here, I have a lovely little report of everything that's happening in each of the different business units.